Okay, let's talk about what's going on here. First thing we're going to do is build the Node.js image to run on Docker. There's a few things that I want to show you before we get started. I don't have anything in my Docker files yet, but this is just a basic Express application running on port 4000 HTTP server, and we're connecting to MongoDB. Now we're going to connect to MongoDB inside of a container. So the first thing I want to do to test to make sure that the connection is going to work is let's build a Mongo container that we can actually connect this app to that is not yet in a container. So we're going to do that from scratch. In the command line, we're going to do docker run, and we want to name the container DB. You can name it whatever you want, doesn't matter. We're going to publish ports 27017, and well, first let's make two volumes. I want to make a volume for the data, so you're going to do docker volume create db data, and then another docker volume create, and I'm going to do one for db config. Okay, now we're going to do our docker run command. We're going to name it db on ports 27017 on our local machine and 2107 coming from the container. We're going to do two volumes. We're going to do db data, and we're going to strap that to data/db inside the container. And then we're going to do our config volume. We're going to strap that to data/config db inside the container. And then all we have to do is just type in the name of the image that we need, which is Mongo, and hit enter. And if you don't have it on your computer, it will automatically pull it for you here and download the image for you. This is pulling the latest version since we did not put a tag on the end of it. If you want to use a different version, you can visit their Docker Hub and put a tag on it, and you'll get that specific version. So right now it's pulling the image. It's going to build a container and run it for us. And this is not going to be in detached mode, so we're going to see everything that's going on. Let's check this out. And we should be able to connect to this MongoDB container from our application that's sitting right here, this Express application. I have in the env file, I have the Mongo URI connection string up here. And right now it says localhost because I'm running this on my machine, and this container is going to be running on my local host. I have Windows and on port 27017. Once we have everything in a container, this will change. We'll be referring to the actual name of the service to resolve that. So look at this. It looks like it's running. This is all the startup logs from MongoDB. If you do a Control-C, your container should still be running. If you run a docker ps command, it shows you all the containers that are currently running. And sure enough, we have our Mongo container running right here on 27017. And if we go to our Node.js app, we're already inside the file here. So I'm just going to boot this up with the nodemon dev script, and the connection is successful. So we are connected to an actual container MongoDB. That's very, very, very simple. Now let's start bundling up this into a container. So to build our image for our Node.js server, we're going to want to create a Docker file in the root of the Node.js directory. And then let's go through these steps really quick. We're going to pull in the node image. We're going to set our working directory in the container. We're going to copy over all of our package.jsons, install our dependencies, and we're going to copy everything into the container. We want to expose port 4000. and the command that I want to run when everything is all ready to go, just like I would if I was in a development environment or a production environment, is node index.js. You want to run node on your server file to start your server. And before, when I showed you the example of setting this up, setting the Mongo container up and connecting to it, if you're on the same network with two containers, you can refer to instead of using localhost, you can refer to your service or your container name up here. So I'm referring to DB 27017 to connect in this case. Now I'm going to create a network. I'm going to connect the MongoDB and I'm going to connect to the Node.js server, and it should make that connection. So let's test this out. The first thing that you're going to want to do is, let's check our networks really quick. Okay. I already made a network, but I want to show you how to. So let me remove AppNet. Something using it already. I'm going to shut down my two containers for examples and start over here. Okay, so let's create a network. We'll call it AppNet. Docker network create AppNet. Yep, you should get an ID back like that. And now if we do a Docker network ls, we'll see that we have the AppNet network here created. It is a bridge network. And then we can start our MongoDB container inside of this network. So let's do docker run -- name. Remember, we're going to want to name this DB to go along with that env file to make sure it matches up and it sends our connection request to the right place. And then we're going to open up ports 27017, 27017. We have our volumes from before still, so we're going to do that. And these should still have your data in them. They don't erase unless you physically erase them. These aren't bind mounts, but they are volumes, and they are stored persistently on your Docker host. Now with the -- network flag is how we're going to pin this container into the network. So I'm going to run this in detached mode. We've already tested this. We know it works. So, oh, okay. I have to get rid of the other DB first. Run it now. You should just get an ID, just like that. If you do Docker PS, you'll see that you are connected right here, 27017. Now to make sure that it's connected to the network, let's inspect, you know what, Docker network inspect AppNet. Okay, so looking inside of this AppNet network, we can see that we have one container already attached to it. The name is DB, the one that we just created. And this is how your connection string gets resolved. It refers to DB, and it will handle everything else for you, the IP address and stuff like that. So let's run Docker. Well, we haven't built this API container yet, so let's build it really quick. So now that you're in let's get into the right directory. We're going to want to go into Docker, or no, we're going to go to cd / Node.js. We're going to run Docker build. Let's tag this to be AFK /API, and we're going to build all. And that's going to run faster for me because I've already had this image built and it's using cache for all the steps. But as you can see, it runs through all the steps one by one, setting up our container. And now we can run it. So let's do docker run. We're going to -- name. Let's name it node. We're going to publish ports 4000. And we're going to put this in that same network, which was AppNet. Run it in detached mode. We're going to do, and we named this image AFK/API. And it's going to be latest. And it's running, or says it's running. Docker PS, you can see that you have it running right here. Let's do Docker logs to see. And our connection was indeed successful. So we successfully have our API or our Node.js container talking to our MongoDB container on the same network, and we're referring to that connection by the name of the container. And it is recognizing it, and it is making the connection. We can exchange data between Node and Mongo now with this connection established. If you do a Docker network inspect again on AppNet, you can see now that you have two containers running inside of this Docker network. And that's how they're talking to each other, because they're on the same network and they can resolve each other's names. All right, let's discuss how we're going to build the front end of our application, the React app part of it. So in here in my web directory, I have just a basic create React app setup. Literally have not added anything except for this Docker file, a Docker ignore file, and an NGINX configuration. We're going to serve this application on port 80 with NGINX inside of the container, the same container as the web app. Now let's go through this Docker file and explain what's going on here, because basically what we're going to be doing is creating one image for the front end, and it's going to have our application code in it, and it's also going to pull in NGINX, apply a custom configuration, and expose port 80 with our application code at the web root. So once this gets built and run, it will run on port 80. So the first thing you have to do is pull in your dependency, which in our case, to install React and get everything running, we're going to need Node. So I'm putting an as client on the end because I'm going to use that towards the bottom of this file. Setting the working directory in the container to /app. So when you see these dots throughout the container, that's going to mean that it's going into the working directory. Setting the path variable up here, and then you're going to want to copy over all your package.jsons, the package.lock.json, and the package.json into the app directory. And this, remember, images are are layered. So the steps that you do things, it does matter because you don't want to run, and for example, you don't want to run yarn build before npm install. It won't work. Each layer gets executed, and then the next layer of the image begins. So it's really important to have the steps laid out properly, and it saves you a lot of space too if you do it the right way. So we install our dependencies with the run command here. Basically, this run command, you can put shell scripts, shell commands in here. You can put npm installs, anything that you need to run from the command line, you put it in these run commands. And then I'm installing React scripts globally to the container. And then after all that's done, I want to copy everything into the container root, which is /app. And now we're going to build the application. We're not going to start it and run the watch. We're going to build it. So it's going to live inside of a web root, and it's going to serve static files. And then here is where we start to build NGINX. So the first thing I want to do is pull in NGINX image. I want to expose port 80 out of this container. And then, this is important, I want to copy from the client, and this client name was the one I mentioned earlier at the top here. It means something. I want to copy the build directory in here to the web root of NGINX so that our application can be served. And then I have a little NGINX configuration over here. It's just bare bones. This is just a test to see if everything's working. We can set it up with a proxy once we get our node talking to it, and we can pass requests that way. So I'm copying this configuration file in NGINX default config to the NGINX conf.d directory where the configuration file lives. The same name lives in this directory, so it's basically just going to overwrite it. And then here I'm executing the command for NGINX. You always need to end your Docker files with a CMD, and they usually have to start with a from. So this should work. This image right here, we can actually build this right now. So we're going to run a Docker build inside of this directory. It's important because we're going to aim at this Docker file. You're going to want to put a tag on it. I'm going to put afk/client and then just a period, a dot. And that will run the Docker file in this directory. It will aim at this Docker file. That was fast for me because I have already built this image, and a lot of this was cached. If you look at the steps, you'll see. If I can get this set up. Using cache, using cache, using cache, using cache, using cache. But look, it went through step by step. It pulled node, then it set our working directory, set the path, copied the JSON, package.json files, installed the scripts, ran the CMD. Now let's do a Docker PS. Oh, wait, we're not running it yet. Let's run it. Docker run. We're going to run it. We're going to name it whatever you want. I'm going to name my client. I'm going to put out publish ports 80. And I think that should do it. And now I'm just going to do afk/client latest. Let's run that. You could put a -d on it to do detached mode so you can get your command line back. But if I open localhost, we should see the application running. So let me refresh this just to make sure. And yes, this is our application. It's running on localhost port 80. You can see all the requests coming in here, all these GET requests. So that means it is indeed working. We do have a working NGINX server serving our React project. I want to show you what happened when we built this NGINX and React frontend in the Docker file and the steps, just to make sure that everything worked well. So if I do a Docker PS, I can see it's running right there, afk/client latest. So I want to actually go inside of this container. So you're always going to do a docker exec-it, and we named it client, and we're going to try to bash into it. Okay, now we're inside of the container right now as a root user. Let's do an ls. These are our files. If everything ran correctly, we should be able to go into the NGINX web root and see our build directory files in there. So let's cd/var/www/html. And if we do an ls here, it does in fact have our NGINX web root has all of our React build files. So this is what is being served on port 80 right now. So it worked. Everything is in there like it's supposed to be. And to get out of this, you always just type exit and it will let you right out. So this is going to be a two-part video. In this first part, I'm going to explain how to get all your containers set up and your images. That way that we know that the connections are being made, that they're talking to each other. And then the second part will describe how everything gets put together with one compose file and the application is working, talking to the front end and the back end and the database. But let's see what we have running right now. We're running our node and we're running our DB instance, and we do have a client built. So if we do a Docker run, we're going to name it client. Remember, this one's running on port 80 because it's an NGINX serving it. Then we're going to put the image name here. And I always mean to run it in detached mode so you get your command line back. But if you Control C out of that, it won't stop the container. If you look, you'll see that it is running right now. So we have all three running. We have our database running, we have our client running, and we have our Node.js server running as well. And so we can go to localhost just to make sure again that it's running, and it is. So in this video, I hope you learned and got out of this how to build your own images and containers from other images and make connections to services on bridge networks, user named bridge networks. Docker has a lot of very useful resources on all of their files. If you need to learn all of the stuff in Docker files, there's a Docker file reference. I'll put those links in the description. And there's Docker Compose reference. Every file that Docker uses, you can find a reference page for that. And that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you. Stay tuned for part 2 of this video where we put together everything and make it run with one command in one file. Thank you. Thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for all the latest content, and please leave a like down below if you enjoyed this video. Until next time.